Welcome. The moment things get quiet, your mind gets louder, doesn't it? Almost like something in you doesn't want to stay there for too long. You suddenly feel the urge to reach for something, don't you? A screen, a task, a distraction, a reason to stay busy. Maybe because your mind is not used to the quiet. Maybe because humans are creatures of movement, of attention, of response. And when the noise falls away, that attention naturally turns inward. Thoughts become easier to hear. Emotions become more visible. Old worries sometimes return. Things you thought you had set aside have a way of finding you again. The stillness we often run from is sometimes exactly what we need. It doesn't immediately solve our problems, and it doesn't immediately provide answers, but it does give us space to hear ourselves again. Thoughts that we usually set aside, details we often overlook, things that have been present all along, quietly waiting for our attention. Stillness doesn't ask us to become someone different. It doesn't even ask us to be wiser, or calmer, or have all the answers. It simply asks us to stop for a bit and to remain. Perhaps this moment does not need to lead anywhere. Perhaps it is enough to simply experience it, to sit without reaching for the next distraction, to pause without filling the silence, to let the world continue moving as it always does. And maybe that is where stillness begins, not as something forced, but as something we choose, a small decision to remain present with what is here. Life has a way of moving so quickly that we rarely have the opportunity to check in with ourselves. Days become weeks, weeks become months. Responsibilities accumulate, habits take over, and before we realize it, we have become very good at moving through our lives without fully being present in them. Somewhere along the way, we lose sight of how we are actually doing, what we are feeling, what we need. Perhaps that is one of the quiet gifts of stillness. It creates space for us to return, not to who we used to be, not to some ideal version of ourselves, but to the person who has been there all along, the one beneath the schedules, the expectations, the distractions. Though sometimes what we find is fatigue, sometimes grief, sometimes loneliness, sometimes relief, sometimes nothing more than a quiet awareness that we have been carrying more than we realized. Whatever meets us there is not there to judge us. It's not asking to be fixed either. It doesn't even need to be pushed away. It only asks to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be allowed a place at the table without needing to change. And perhaps that is what returning really means. Not becoming someone new, not finding all the answers, but remembering how to sit beside ourselves again. Returning to ourselves is one thing. Staying is something else entirely. Because even after we choose stillness, even after we slow down, the urge to leave and distract ourselves often remains, to fill the silence before it becomes too uncomfortable. And that's okay. We have spent so much of our lives learning how to move away from discomfort that when stillness asks us to remain, it can feel unfamiliar. The first few moments are most often the hardest. The restlessness, the wandering thoughts, the feeling that we should be doing something more productive, the quiet urge to get up and move on. And yet, perhaps this is where something important begins. To discover that we can stay, even as thoughts come and go, even as emotions rise and settle, even when uncertainty remains. We do not have to run from every uncomfortable feeling. We do not have to leave the moment simply because it asks us to be present. Perhaps acceptance begins here, not as surrender, but as a willingness to remain with what is, to sit beside it, to make space for it, to allow it to be here without immediately asking it to become something else. And the more often we practice staying, the less unfamiliar stillness begins to feel, until one day, what once felt uncomfortable begins to feel familiar. When we stop running, when we stop filling every empty space, something begins to change. The things we have been rushing past become easier to recognize. The warmth of a morning drink, the feeling of sunlight through a window, the comfort of a familiar room. Small things, ordinary things, things that were always there. Stillness has a way of slowing our attention enough for us to catch up with life. We've been so busy looking ahead that we miss what was already here. And perhaps that is one of the gifts hidden within the quiet. We begin to hear ourselves more clearly, not just our worries, but our needs, our limits, and our hopes. The things that bring us peace, the things that quietly drain us, the things that matter, and the things that no longer do. Stillness does not change who we are, but it can help us remember what we have been overlooking. It can remind us that life is not made entirely of milestones and achievements. It is also made of moments. Moments we miss when we're always moving toward what comes next. Perhaps that is what stillness has been offering us all along. Not an escape from life, but a way to return to ourselves. Because for so long, many of us have been searching for something, a sense of peace, clarity, and belonging. And we often search for it somewhere beyond where we are, in the next achievement, the next version of ourselves, the next chapter of our lives, always looking a little further ahead, always believing that once we're there, everything will feel complete. But perhaps what we've been longing for was never as far away as it felt. And maybe that is what coming home truly means. Not arriving somewhere new, but reconnecting with something familiar. Something that has remained with us through every season, every difficult chapter, every uncertain moment. Ourselves. Whenever the world becomes too loud, perhaps you can remember this feeling. You now know the way back, and whenever you need it, you can return.